a major focus in this year's presidential race, specifically among voters who were not satisfied with the idea of voting for Trump or President Joe Biden in this year's election. Your latest poll from July showed 61% of voters were excited to cast their ballot in November compared to 40% of voters surveyed in June. What does this polling suggest with this switch in the Democratic ticket?
Yeah. I think there was, especially among Democrats, a willingness to vote for Joe Biden, but not enthusiasm for doing it. And enthusiasm is important because it motivates volunteers, it motivates getting out to vote, and all of those things. With him off the ticket, that downward pressure on enthusiasm has been lifted. Harris, in her rallies, is a very different candidate than Joe Biden in his events, and you see that. Now, whether it can continue for the next 88 days until Election Day, that's a different question. But it's clear that Democrats have welcomed Harris. In our survey, 92% of Democrats say they're either very or somewhat satisfied with her as the nominee. That's a big unity within the party that was more divided with Biden.
I want to go back to your point about that potentially changing as we head closer to November. I want to get your thoughts with Vice President Harris only having about 3 weeks under her belt of campaigning. Is it still too early to really depict her impact among voters right now?
I think it is clear that the short-term impact has been very positive, very good for her. I don't think there have been many, if any, negative news cycles during that period for her. That's not likely to last through Election Day because every campaign has some good news cycles and some bad news cycles. But right now, you're building to the Democratic National Convention. If she can keep that momentum going for another couple of weeks, the convention for Democrats will boost their image the same way it boosted the Republican image in Milwaukee. But what issues are going to come up, what charges, what attacks are going to start having an effect, that I think it's too soon to tell.
And Charles, I want to switch gears now to another crucial race here in Wisconsin, the race for the U.S. Senate. Your poll shows Senator Tammy Baldwin is still leading her Republican challenger, Eric Hovde, 53 to 46% among registered voters, but with about 14% of voters still undecided. How could this impact the margin of victory for either candidate?
Well, undecideds, of course, are undecided. At the moment, they don't split heavily one way or another, and so the margin is just a little bit tighter when you've asked undecideds if you had to choose, how would you vote? But Baldwin still leads by either 5 or 7 points when you ask them if they had to choose. What we've seen over the last year is Hovde has gotten a lot better known. He's gone from over 80% that didn't know him now into the mid-30s that don't know him. But that's still a ways to go to introduce himself. The bad news for him is that over the last 3 polls, his unfavorable rating has gone up a little more than his favorables have gone up. So he's not gained ground, he's lost ground on the favorability battle. On the other hand, the Senate race is running in the shadow of these momentous presidential election changes. I expect after the DNC, we'll see a real ramping up of the Senate campaign, and things could shift as that 14% undecided and as the 30-something% that don't have an opinion of Hovde develop an opinion in the run to November.
Low voter turnout. It was a huge issue for Democrats in June prior to President Joe Biden dropping out of the race. We did see Senator Baldwin start to distance herself from the Biden campaign, choosing not to attend some of Biden's events here in Wisconsin. Could low voter turnout from the presidential race at that time have impacted her campaign?
Yes, and we talked about that in several surveys in the spring and June, where the potential drop-off in turnout because of people not being enthusiastic about Biden at the top of the ticket could impact the Senate race and especially the legislative races down ballot for the state assembly and state senate. Now that Democratic enthusiasm has bumped up, I don't think that's as big of a risk, though it remains to be seen. Notably, Baldwin did show up for Harris's rally in West Allis and again in Eau Claire. So I think that's a pretty strong signal that the campaign thinks they're boosting turnout and support with the Harris campaign now, as opposed to when Biden was the top of the ticket.
Charles Franklin, Marquette Law School Poll Director. Charles, thank you so much for joining us on the show this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, we talk with the candidates running in the 3rd Congressional District. The winner of that primary will take on Derek Van Orden in November.